So hi everyone, my name is ire'ne Silva, and I'm joining y'all today on Writers League of Texas series on writing, which is a little bit odd because I've never done this before, and so I'm basically staring at a small video of myself waving my hands around. But I'm glad to be able to sit with y'all for a bit and share some thoughts about writing. This presentation was inspired by a question that I was asked about a year ago, and it's lingered with me, and so I've been wanting to talk about this, and so I have lots of thoughts around it, and I kind of want to touch on some of them. Some of y'all might have heard some of the questions that I'm going to bring up, but it's because all of these things are connected, and so I'm trying my best for those of y'all that have not heard this before, so that way y'all can also join me on this this connected series of thoughts. So to go back a step or two, my name is ire'ne Silva. I'm the poet and a writer. I have 3 collections of poetry, a collection of short stories. I'm currently working on a 2nd collection of short stories and also on my 1st novel. The work is going very, very slowly because that's how I write, and that's okay. So as I was saying, this question that I was asked about a year ago was at the end of a panel where we were talking about characters and story. And the person asked about adding themes to their novel. They said, I have this novel and I've been working on it for a while, and I've decided that I want to add some themes around social justice to it. How do I do that? And to me, that seemed like the oddest question because it seemed as if this person had already created a world, a story, characters, everything, and then had decided to add this hugely important element at the end, or, as he was approaching the end. And I thought that's odd to me because it seemed a backward sort of way of looking at it, in much the same way that, let's say you're baking a cake. You can't, after you've put the batter in the oven, then remember that you needed to have added eggs to it. Take the half-baked batter out of the oven, put the eggs in, and then put it back in the oven and expect to have a cake. In the description for this talk, I used Stephen Covey's talk about the big stones in a jar. I don't know how many of y'all have read this example, probably a lot of you have. But from what I remember, and of course this is going to be very badly paraphrased, there was a professor who was speaking to a class of business students, and he told them, you know what? This feels really weird. Samantha, let me go back. Let's start again.
Okay, no problem.
It feels so strange.
Yeah. And how's the chat? I asked a question. I just asked you what the names of your books were, but I
saw it, but I didn't see it till the end. This feels really weird. Okay.
Yeah. Don't worry. We can start over.
All right. So next time we'll start and go. It just feels very drifty, and I was like, oh yeah, I was supposed to talk about myself. And also it would probably be helpful to have the name of my own talk up, since right now I can't remember what I called it.
Yeah, it takes some getting used to just talking to yourself.
It is, like, I've had Zoom for like a couple meetings, but mostly it's other people talking, and then you just jump in to argue. But
yeah.
But it's weird without that. Okay, here we go. Let's start again.
Okay.
Oh, and what are we calling these series?
We don't really have a name for them yet. I don't know. They're just like craft presentations. So you could say something like that. A series of craft presentations.
Okay. Yeah, I just feel like I'm saying, Okay. Thank you much.
No problem.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Writers League of Texas series on craft presentations. This one is titled, let me look for my beautiful little title here, Story, Truth, and Purpose, Approaching the Story Before You Write the First Word. My name is ire'ne Silva. I'm a writer here in Texas, poet and writer. I've published 3 books, 3 books of poetry, Furia, Blood Sugar Canto, and CUICACALLI, House of Song, as well as a collection of short stories, Flesh to Bone. I'm currently working on a second collection of short stories and working on my first novel. I've had the good fortune of teaching writing workshops and talking about writing pretty intensely for at least the last decade. And so today I just wanted to share some thoughts about those important ideas about truth, purpose, story, and how those shape not only the project that we're working on, but also how it shapes our lives as writers, and hopefully offer something that is helpful to you. I am presenting this talk on March 30th, so it's a bit of a tense and worrisome time, and a time of intense grieving, intense anxiety, and for a lot of people, a time of intense contemplation. And so it's helpful, I think, sometimes not so much to concentrate on productivity or pages, but perhaps this time of quiet might be a good time to think about what it is that we're doing, why we do it, and why we are approaching it the way we do. There are 4 questions that I almost always ask in every single writing workshop that I've ever done, because I really think they are the center of how we approach all of this. I have never really seen the appeal of looking at ways to trick ourselves into writing, or bribe ourselves into writing, or push ourselves into writing. Instead, what I want to always emphasize is the necessity of telling ourselves the truth. I really think that that's what writing has been for me, a series, a journey of learning to tell myself the truth at deeper and deeper levels as time goes by. So I'm going to ask you a few questions, and you can just jot them down. And it's completely up to you if you want to pause this, think about the answer, write a few lines, or if you just want to jot down the questions and work on them later. Completely up to you. But there'll be no PowerPoint, and there'll be no point in this talk where I will show you what all the questions were. So got to catch them as we go. So the very first question is about what the purpose of story is. Not just in terms of defining a story, not just in terms of audience and who we hope will want to read our story, will want to buy our books, will want to listen. It's about what the purpose of story is. So for different people, experience, cultural background, due to many different reasons, we'll have different ways of looking at what the purpose of story is. So first question, what is the purpose of story for you? A couple suggestions. Is it about memory? Is it about remembering on behalf of your community, on behalf of your culture, on behalf of your family, on behalf of a family member, on behalf of someone you love? Is it memory for yourself? What is that? Is the purpose something else? Is it a way of bringing imagination and vision to bear on this world? for the purposes of looking into the human spirit, the human heart, looking at social injustice, looking at the wounds and scars of history? Is it about understanding other people? Is it about exploring language and image? Is it about exploring the world or different places or different peoples? What is the purpose of story? And, the purpose of the story can be a lot of things. One of the things that I find difficult sometimes is that I feel like a lot of people put literary fiction, at the top, and then look down on genre fiction. But for how many people, has genre fiction, whether it's a romance novel or a sci-fi novel or whatever it is, been a form of not just entertainment, but also distraction or escape? If you are in a difficult time in your life, you might find that a romance novel or a science fiction novel or something else helps you endure the time you're in, helps you escape from the daily pressures. You never know, as a writer, what your work means to others. And so in this way, whatever genre it is, whatever kind of work it is, whoever it's published by, whatever platform it's on, whether it's published or self-published or on the bestseller list or, posted online, your writing could save someone's life, could help them understand something they didn't understand before. It can do so many things that we don't even know. And these are tremendous gifts to realize that as much as we have our purpose, that as writers, that our readers can find something in our work that we never knew was there. But think about this a bit. Think about the purpose of a thing. The other thing I wanted to bring up was a question, and actually the inspiration for this talk was a question that I was asked about a year ago at a writer's panel. A writer stood up and said, I'm working on this novel, or I've been working on this novel, and what I want to do now is I want to make sure that I add some elements of social justice. And I thought, interesting question, but very strange question, because that question felt like a reminder to me that our brains work in very different ways. I know a lot of people love the idea of outlines and character sketches and all of these, and plot lines and whatever else. I, as a writer, don't like any of those things and can't use them. Because for me, I want to always be surprised by what I'm writing, be surprised by what comes up on the page, be surprised by who my characters reveal themselves to be. So I don't mind what to others might seem like extra work of having to go back and having to go back and having to go back in order to work in all of these new things that I've discovered as I've been progressing through work. And so I thought, how interesting to have already conceived of a story and characters and a plot line and everything else, and then at a certain point decide, okay, I want to fit in some social justice themes. And one of the things that it made me think of was Stephen Covey's idea of I don't know, I call it the big stone story. And you can look it up online, look it up under, what's it under? Under Stephen Covey and, the big rocks of life. And I'm going to completely badly paraphrase the story, but what I remember most from it is that there was a speaker, a professor who was talking to a classroom of students, and he brings in a huge glass jar and he fills it up with big rocks. And then he asks the students, is this jar full? And, the jar is heaped up with all these big stones. And they say, yes, it's full. And he goes, no, it's not. So then he goes and he takes gravel and he fits gravel in, shakes the jar a little bit, fits in all these little, little rocks into this jar. and asks the students again, is it full? And a few say yes, a few say no. He goes and he takes a bag of sand, pours the sand in, and also shakes the jar a little bit until he fits in all the sand that he can. Asks the students again, is it full? By this time, they all say no. So then he brings a pitcher of water and pours water in. And so now the jar has big stones, little rocks, sand, and water, and is completely full. And so he asks the students, okay, what is it that I am trying to illustrate by showing you this? And the students say that the students say, okay, look at the jar. What it means is that if you concentrate and work hard on it and figure out how to do it, you can always fit more into your schedule, fit more into your life. And the speaker who's speaking to the students tells them, no, actually, that's not what I meant to show you. What I meant to show you was that if you don't put the big rocks in first, you will never get them in. And this applies to our lives in many different ways. We always talk about different priorities. We talk about what it is that's really important to us. The problem is, I think that for a lot of us, we don't put the big rocks into the jar first. We get caught up in the water or the sand or the gravel level, and not in the big rocks. So a couple different ways to look at this idea of big rocks. One is for our projects. I would lean towards the idea that if you're going to have social justice themes, or let's say you're going to have a historical novel, that what you want to do is you want to begin your story there. You don't add the things in later, but you begin there. You look at a certain time of history. You start with a certain social justice theme, and then you build your story from there. Because in many ways, not in many ways, and pretty much always, I always talk about making strategic choices for our writing. So with whatever story or project we're working on, what is the most strategic place to start? What is the most strategic story to tell? What character is the most strategic to tell the story, from their point of view? All of these different choices we have. I talk a lot about writing being about choosing from infinity. You have an infinite choices. So how do you go about strategically choosing how to tell the story that has infinite possibilities? So we begin there. So what are your big rocks for your project? What are the things you absolutely have to talk about? And then have that launch your work. I've seen so many times, I do a lot of editing manuscripts and consulting with people on their work. I see many times where people have perhaps not chosen the most solid, the most urgent big rocks for their novel. And so they get to a point, 50, 100, couple hundred pages in, where suddenly they have lost all steam and they've lost all perspective, and they have no idea how to go on or what to do with the mess, the book, the thing in progress. And part of it, I think, is about looking at those big rocks. What did we choose as the big rocks? So, other questions. Two very important questions. One is, why this project? Why is this project important? And two, what is this project in your life? Which you can also relate back to, the purpose of the story. What is the purpose of the story? And what is the purpose of the story in your life? And look at the big rock items, not the small rocks, but the big ones. You can pause if you like, we can keep on going. All right, so as we've chosen to keep on going, So the other thing that we really need to think about as well when it comes to big rocks is how those work out in our lives. So a lot of us right now are on lockdown, are sheltering at home, whatever we want to call it. And I see on social media this idea that we're all going to be immensely productive right now and write entire novels and write operas and do crazy things and learn 5 different languages and whatever else, which, you know, some of us might do. I, right now, I'm inclined to napping and resting, and although I'm still working from home as well. But the thing is, it doesn't matter what the situation is or what our expectations are for it. Whether, you know, we are completely free right now and have nothing but time and energy, or whether we are living lives that are extremely, extremely busy. These are always the things that we need to think about when it comes to writing and our lives as writers. What are the big rocks? Time, energy, and it depends on what you want to call it. Some people would call it inspiration. I don't like inspiration because it sounds sort of passive. Drive, which sounds less passive, but I don't like it because it doesn't have very much emotion in it. My preference is desire. So we have time, energy, and desire, I think, are the main 3 big rocks to look at. Some people, I think, would also, you know, consider a support system a big rock. I'm trying to think of what else might also come in. Ability to concentrate. That's another big one. So you look at these different things, and you look at how they manifest in your life, what they look like in your life. So 1, what does time look like in our lives? And, you know, a lot of us have the idea that we need 8 or 10 or 12 hours a day to be able to write. And then a lot of us have seen the different articles where they're like, you know, you take your 5 minutes and run with them because that's what you've got. So it's not so much, for some people, it's how do I find more time? How do I give myself permission to use the time that I have? How do I use these little bits of time that I have without resenting my work or my family or myself or my body or anything else for the fact that they are little fragments of time? When it comes to energy, you know, how much energy do I as a writer have? How much energy is left after the obligations of the day? How much energy am I willing to give to my project and to my writing? Because that's it too. You know, what are we holding back from ourselves, and what are we willing to pour into a project? And if you can come to a place where you say, you know, whatever time, whatever energy I have, I'm going to pour into this project. If you say, I'm going to shape my life so that it's possible for me to write, I'm going to shape my support systems to help me do this work. If I'm going to decide on, you know, what activities, what projects, what other things am I involved in, and what do they do to my writing? So that you're able to figure out, okay, what am I willing to do here? How much am I willing to give? And all of this relates back to the purpose. Is the purpose of your story, of your project, important enough to you that you would do this to your life, that you would shape your life around it? You know, how do we make these things work? And that's part of it. And you know, one of the reasons too that I go back often to the important 4 questions, you know, why is this project important? What is this project in your life? Why do I write? There's a fourth one. There's a good fourth one. I don't know what it is right now, but it'll come back to me. But the reason that I suggest that we ask ourselves these questions all of the time is because the answers change. They change with each project. They change at different periods in our lives. This idea of big rocks changes. And so we have to constantly re-examine it. You know, perhaps not every day, every few months, at least twice a year, I think. And maybe some big re-examinations after a project is completed or after a few years. Because we have to go back and kind of dump everything back out again and figure out, are the big rocks that we have still the same important big rocks that we had before? And if they're not, then we need to throw one out so we can bring in the next important big rock, or fit in more of the gravel, or fit in whatever else we need to fill in. So incredibly important to re-examine that, and to not necessarily attach ourselves to the original big rocks, because then that builds resistance within us. And so what you end up having, what that ends up looking like, is that you're 178 pages into a book, when suddenly you realize that you don't have the same priorities. And sometimes what that means is that you have to go back, start again on page 1, and revamp the entire thing, because you want it to fit your purpose, fit your reason for shaping your life right now. And sadly, a lot of us think that this is wasted work, or that we had wasted time along the way. But instead what it is that we are using the time and energy and vision that we have to make something important to us, to make something that might possibly be important to other people. Because the way I look at it is, if I'm going to spend hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of time and energy on a book, creating a book, then I want that creation to be the absolutely most truthful and most real thing that I could possibly make. That's what I'm looking for. I also really like the idea of writing the most difficult thing that I can write. Not the easiest, but the most difficult, because I figure I learn more from that. It teaches me more about what story is. It teaches me more about the importance of whatever project that I'm working on. So we have that. All right, so we have our truth, we have our purpose, we have story, we have the big rocks of the project and the big rocks of our lives. And kind of we're in this place of moving from one to the other. So I want to come back to looking at the big rocks of a project, or the big rocks of a story. And so here's where, again, we are looking at choosing from infinite possibilities. We are looking at strategy. And we are looking at how we contemplate these things, either at the beginning of a project or at any point along a project where we need to kind of take a moment and reassess our work and figure out where we are. And so these are always, important things to figure out and to re-examine. So as we go into this idea of a story, we want to look at what those different big rocks are. So let's start with, well, for me, myself, I always start with the character. For you, it might be a place. It might be, an incident, a historical incident, a current incident. It might be, if you're writing a sci-fi novel, it might be a futuristic moment or an alien. I would say at the beginning of any project that you can't have too many big rocks. And it might help visually. I love sticky notes. It might help visually to kind of write down what all of your big rocks are and toss them up on a wall somewhere so you can see them all. I don't think that there's a way to have too many big rocks, because what you want in a project, especially in a book length project, is you want to be able to look at the project as a vehicle. So you want a vehicle, you want the idea of a vehicle that is big enough to hold many things. So maybe you think, okay, you know, a motorcycle's good. I can carry my backpack, a couple other things. But you can't carry very much. Cars a little bit better, pickups a little bit better, trucks a little bit bigger, you know, 18-wheeler. Because you want to be able to fit all of these big rocks in there. You want it, not necessarily because they're all going to stay in there, not necessarily because you have to take them all with you, but you want to imagine a shape that is large enough and deep enough and strong enough to hold as much as you might possibly want it to hold. Again, you know, we have to think in terms of endurance, because it takes some work, it takes some endurance to get through writing a 200 or 300 or 400 page novel. You need a vehicle that has those dimensions for all of those big rocks. Even if over time you end up throwing a couple rocks out because they're too heavy or they're too cumbersome or they're not quite shaped to your story anymore, but you want the capacity for it. So you do want to do that. And then we need to think of strategy in terms of how do we launch a story and how do we think about the long-term energy of a story. One of the things that you know, has come up in the past few years is this debate over likable characters, especially if they are female characters. You know, do they need to be likable? And the debate goes back and forth about whether or not we want to like them or not like them or whatever else, whether or not that's marketable, whether or not that's something readers want. But I think it misses the important question. The question is not, are they likable or not? The question is the character compelling? Is the character compelling enough for the reader to keep the reader's attention for hundreds of pages? Does that character have enough energy to continue to engage the writer? There's many books, actually, now that I think about it. There's many books that I don't like or that I was unable to finish because I felt like the writer didn't like their character. You know, whether it's an unlikable character or not, you can always feel when the writer is drawn to their own character and when they're not. And when they're not, it makes for miserable reading. It really does, because there's no zing of energy. There's no charisma to the character. There's no pool to find out what's happening to these people in the story, to find out what's happening to this character, to find out how they're going to change or develop. So you want that energy towards that character. You want for that character to be strategically chosen. And many times we think that either the character that is most like us or most unlike us is going to be the character that will propel the story. Sometimes we think that it literally has to be us, that it has to be a position of authority, a position of I hate the word authenticity, but this position of authenticity to be able to tell a story. And it depends on the story. How do you pick the person that the story is told through in a way that is truthful to you as a writer, that is truthful and harmonious to your purpose, and that in a way that doesn't dislodge or undermine any of the big rocks. There's a way there that character fits into a position of supporting your big rocks. And then everything else that gets added afterwards, the gravel, your sand, your water, all these little details gets added afterwards. But you want your character, your setting, your plot, your story, and your other themes to work with your big rocks. So that's a way of contemplating how we enter the story and without losing sight of what the big rocks are. Now, as you go through the novel or the project, you might find that one of the big rocks isn't working. It's clashing with everything else. And so then that's when you consider, is this big rock important? Is this truly part of the story? As I said, I'm not a fan of outlines or character sketches or anything like that. So I often find in the middle of a project that one of the big rocks doesn't work. Maybe it's a part of a future project. Maybe it's a rock that I've already brought up and written on in previous projects, and I find that I'm done. So let me see, facing the question here. All right, so how do you decide to drop the rocks? I don't know that there's any other way of explaining it or describing it other than to say that your big rocks should carry an emotional charge. You should think about the big rock and emotionally feel the weight of that rock. For example, so I've been working on this novel in progress since 2005. 15 years in. So at many times I've thought, okay, is this still a work that I want to continue working on? Does it still have meaning to me? Does it still have weight? Are these characters still compelling? Is the story still compelling? What are all the reasons that I've said that it's important? And are they still as important? One of the things that this story is it's a story based in South Texas on the border, which is where I mostly grew up, and where if I have to, talk about feeling homesick, that's what I feel homesick for. And so I think of the weight of that rock, of knowing that I want to talk about the South Texas of my memory, of my childhood, and the ways that it shaped me. And when I think of that rock is still heavy and necessary and full of heat, full of light. So that's something I've got to keep. It's a novel that's also about both family and isolation, community and lost histories. And that rock is still heavy, is still bright. There's things that I've dropped along the way because I thought that you get crazy thoughts in the middle of writing a book. You think that, okay, this book, the story needs to be more like a movie, or this plot needs to be more obvious. And what I found over those 15 years of working on this book is that keeps falling away from me. These ideas that I think are important fall away. Ideas about certain character relationships, certain memories of the main character, and how they shape them. All of these over the years keep falling away and keep falling away. And so, one, this novel is going to be much shorter than I thought it would be, but also, even 15 years into the work, it feels, the project itself still feels like a vehicle that holds many rocks in it. It still feels urgent. And that's one of the things that I always talk about, urgency, passion, the desire for this thing. Does it still exist for you? And I think a lot of us end up laboring on projects way beyond the point that we perhaps should have, either because we at some point insisted, this has to happen, I have to finish this, and finishing is the goal, instead of learning, instead of enjoyment of our project, instead of developing ourselves as writers, instead just finishing, making the goal line, getting to the end of the pages becomes the goal. And I don't know that those things have energy or buoyancy or speed to them, energy to them. So there's things entire things that we should have let fall away, as well as things that we stay with, because every time you weigh them, every time you think about the big rocks, every time you think about the importance of that project to you, it continues to live in you. It continues to say, I want out. It continues to say, I need you to write me. I need you to bring me into the world. I need you to manifest me. And for those of us, like myself, who work full-time jobs and have caregiving responsibilities, and of course everybody has life and finances and health and all these other things to work on, you want your project to be so meaningful to you that you also shape the big rocks of your life around this possibility, this commitment to the creative project. And so, let's make what we make worthy of our pouring our lives into making it. I want to leave you with another prompt, a contemplation that you can write through if you like. And that is not so much about what the finish line or the finished project is. It is about looking beyond your current project. I always say I never finish a book until the next book that I want to write after that, until the necessity for that next book is so great that I have to finish the one I'm working on because I want to work on the next one. So beyond the project that you're working on, that you're starting, or that you're in the middle of, or that you're finishing it, what is there beyond that for you? Either in the next writing project or in your life. What is the next thing? What perhaps are the next big rocks that you haven't explored yet? Thank you all so much for joining me.